For months, the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie has generated countless theories, anonymous tips, and emotional appeals from people hoping that one small piece of information might finally lead investigators to answers. Just when it seemed the story had settled into a familiar pattern of unanswered questions, another unexpected claim surfaced. This time, it wasn't simply another anonymous message. According to reports, the sender claimed to possess something far more significant: a video that allegedly showed Nancy Guthrie with the person responsible for her abduction during what was described as the final day of her life. It was an extraordinary claim. If true, it could answer questions investigators have been asking for months. If false, it could become yet another distraction in a case already filled with uncertainty. That is exactly why the latest message has drawn so much attention. According to reports from TMZ, the anonymous writer claimed to know the identities of the people responsible for Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The individual reportedly said there were only 2 people directly involved, and insisted that recent anonymous tips about a possible burial site in Mexico had come from someone else entirely. The writer even claimed to know where investigators should be looking, saying that the evidence could be handed over under one condition. Before we get started, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. We cover thoughtful, evidence-based updates on ongoing investigations, so if that's the kind of content you enjoy, please subscribe and join our growing community. Now, let's take a look at the latest development in the Nancy Guthrie case. The demand was unusual. Instead of asking for millions of dollars, the writer reportedly requested 1 Bitcoin in exchange for information. Along with that demand came another startling statement. The sender claimed to possess a mobile phone containing video footage of Nancy Guthrie alongside what was described as the primary abductor. According to the message, that phone had been hidden in a secure location where it could supposedly be recovered once payment had been made. Naturally, those claims raised immediate questions. If someone truly possessed evidence that could solve one of the country's most closely followed investigations, why approach a media organization instead of law enforcement? Why risk delaying an investigation by negotiating publicly? And perhaps most importantly, why demand payment before allowing investigators to verify whether any of the claims were genuine? Those questions quickly became part of the story. According to TMZ, company founder Harvey Levin requested proof before taking the claims seriously. Rather than immediately accepting the message, he reportedly asked the anonymous writer to provide a screenshot or some form of evidence showing that the phone and video actually existed. TMZ also stated that the FBI had been notified about the communication. That alone illustrates how delicate situations like this can become. Investigators cannot afford to ignore information that could potentially help solve a case. At the same time, they also cannot assume every anonymous message is authentic. High-profile investigations often attract people seeking attention, financial gain, or simply the thrill of inserting themselves into a story already dominating headlines. Unfortunately, history shows that false confessions and fabricated tips are not uncommon in major criminal investigations. That brings us to another important part of this story. This latest communication did not arrive in isolation. It followed weeks of public discussion surrounding 2 earlier ransom notes that authorities have reportedly examined closely. One of those notes demanded millions of dollars and claimed that Nancy Guthrie was being held alive. Another later message suggested that she had died and included the haunting phrase that she was now with nature. Those earlier communications immediately divided public opinion. Some believed they reflected inside knowledge available only to someone directly connected to the case. Others suspected they were nothing more than elaborate hoaxes. The latest message has only deepened that uncertainty. Because of those growing questions, one respected former FBI investigator was asked to evaluate what had been happening. James Fitzgerald is well known for his work as both an FBI profiler and forensic linguist. During his career, he assisted in numerous major investigations, including work connected to the Unabomber case. Rather than focusing only on fingerprints or physical evidence, Fitzgerald has spent decades studying the language criminals use, examining word choices, sentence structure, grammar, and subtle linguistic habits that sometimes reveal more than people realize. When he was asked about this newest message, his reaction was direct. According to Fitzgerald, he was immediately skeptical. He explained that if someone genuinely possessed information capable of identifying kidnappers, revealing locations, or producing video evidence, going first to a television outlet simply didn't make much sense. In his view, anyone sincerely trying to help would likely approach investigators privately rather than negotiating through the media. He also questioned another practical detail. If the anonymous writer truly knew dangerous people capable of carrying out an abduction, publicly inserting himself into the case could place his own safety at risk. Fitzgerald argued that such behavior seemed inconsistent with someone genuinely fearing violent criminals. His skepticism extended beyond the latest message. In fact, he suggested that many of the communications surrounding the Nancy Guthrie investigation could be the work of opportunists rather than the actual person responsible for the disappearance. According to Fitzgerald, highly publicized investigations often attract individuals who hope to profit financially or simply enjoy the attention that comes from becoming part of the story. That assessment does not mean investigators should dismiss every tip. Far from it. Experienced investigators routinely examine every credible lead because occasionally an unexpected message does contain valuable information. The challenge is separating genuine evidence from distractions, and that process often takes considerable time. As viewers have watched new claims emerge week after week, one thing has become increasingly clear. Every new letter, email, or anonymous message creates another difficult decision for investigators. Ignore it, and they could overlook an important breakthrough. Chase every claim aggressively, and valuable time could be diverted away from stronger leads. That balancing act has become one of the defining challenges of the Nancy Guthrie investigation. But another detail stood out. While Fitzgerald expressed serious doubts about the newest message, his thoughts on the earlier ransom notes proved even more revealing. His analysis raised questions about the language, the timing, and one crucial piece of evidence that he believes should have been present from the very beginning. Those observations would take the discussion in an entirely different direction. James Fitzgerald's skepticism didn't stop with the newest anonymous message. In fact, once the conversation turned to the earlier ransom notes, he began pointing out details that, in his opinion, didn't fit the way genuine kidnappings have historically unfolded in the United States. At first, that seemed straightforward. The first note reportedly claimed that Nancy Guthrie had been taken and demanded a ransom of $4 million. It was addressed to Savannah Guthrie and reportedly opened with the words, "Hello, Savannah, we have your mother." On the surface, it resembled what many people imagine a ransom demand would look like. But Fitzgerald believes the details deserve a much closer look. Drawing on decades of FBI experience, he explained that genuine kidnapping for ransom cases are surprisingly rare in the United States. Because there are so few examples, investigators often compare new cases with previous ones to see whether familiar patterns emerge. According to Fitzgerald, one element has consistently appeared in successful ransom cases: proof that the victim is still alive. That proof can take many forms. It could be a recent photograph, a recorded voice message, a handwritten note known only to the victim, or another piece of evidence that convinces investigators the hostage is alive. Without something like that, law enforcement has little reason to believe a ransom demand can actually deliver what it promises. In the Nancy Guthrie case, Fitzgerald questioned why no such proof reportedly accompanied the demand. If you're going to be taken seriously, he explained, offer proof of life. To him, that omission was significant. He also found another detail unusual. Rather than leaving instructions at Nancy Guthrie's home immediately after the reported abduction, the communications appeared later through electronic channels and eventually even reached media organizations. Fitzgerald suggested that if someone had carefully planned a kidnapping for financial gain, leaving a written message at the scene could actually have reduced risk. A simple note could have directed the family where to expect further instructions without immediately exposing electronic communications to investigators. Instead, everything seemed to unfold differently. That difference may not prove anything on its own. Every criminal case develops in its own way, and investigators have repeatedly reminded the public that many facts remain confidential. Still, Fitzgerald believes the sequence raises legitimate questions about whether the author of those notes was actually connected to the disappearance. Then, something unexpected happened. The discussion shifted from the mechanics of a kidnapping to what Fitzgerald believes may have motivated the crime itself. For months, he has shared a theory that differs from many public discussions surrounding the case. According to Fitzgerald, if Nancy Guthrie was indeed abducted, the intended target may never have been Nancy herself. Instead, he believes the crime could have been directed towards someone much more visible, Savannah Guthrie. He stressed that this remains only a theory and that investigators have not publicly confirmed such a motive. Even so, he suggested that an individual obsessed with Savannah might have viewed her mother as a way of causing maximum emotional pain. It is a disturbing possibility, but one Fitzgerald believes deserves consideration. According to his reasoning, someone unable to reach a public figure directly might instead focus on a close family member. If that were true, the financial demands contained in later communications might simply be distractions rather than the original purpose behind the crime. Whether investigators share that assessment remains unclear. As with many aspects of the Nancy Guthrie investigation, authorities have released only limited information while the case remains active. That uncertainty has left room for countless theories, some grounded in evidence and others based largely on speculation. Fitzgerald repeatedly urged caution. He reminded viewers that anonymous writers often insert themselves into major criminal investigations without having any genuine connection to the crime. Some seek money, others crave publicity. A few simply enjoy watching investigators and the public react to their messages. History has shown that this happens far more often than many people realize. That brings us to the second ransom note. Unlike the first communication, this message reportedly abandoned the demand for money. Instead, it claimed that Nancy Guthrie had died and included the unsettling phrase that she was now with nature. Those words immediately attracted attention. People searched for hidden meanings. Some wondered whether the phrase pointed toward a desert, a forest, or even a burial site. Others questioned whether the wording reflected someone whose first language might not be English. Fitzgerald approached it differently. As both a profiler and forensic linguist, he cautioned against reading too much into a single phrase without seeing the complete document. He explained that investigators examine every detail in context, including spelling, punctuation, sentence order, grammar, and word choice. Looking at only a short quotation, he argued, can easily lead to incorrect conclusions. He even recalled another major investigation from his FBI career. During the Washington, D.C. sniper case, a short phrase released publicly was misunderstood after media reports changed just a few words. Those small differences led outside commentators to build theories around language that had never actually been written. That experience, Fitzgerald said, illustrates why investigators prefer to examine original documents rather than summaries. Still, he did offer one observation. The phrase, with nature, in his opinion, does not necessarily reveal a location at all. A body left in the woods, buried underground, placed in water, or even cremated could all be described in broad terms as being with nature. Because the wording is so general, Fitzgerald believes it provides very little practical guidance. In other words, people may be searching for meaning where none exists. As the interview continued, one point became increasingly clear. Fitzgerald was not dismissing the investigation itself. On the contrary, he repeatedly emphasized that law enforcement should examine every communication, every anonymous tip, and every possible lead. His concern was that investigators should avoid allowing unverified messages to consume valuable time that could otherwise be spent pursuing stronger evidence. That careful balance remains one of the greatest challenges facing any major investigation. Yet before the conversation ended, Fitzgerald raised another issue that could shape the public's understanding of the case. He suggested investigators may eventually face an important decision about how much information should be released and whether greater transparency could help generate new leads or simply create even more confusion. That question would become the focus of the final part of the story. As the interview drew to a close, James Fitzgerald returned to a question that has become increasingly important as the Nancy Guthrie investigation continues. Should investigators release more of what they know to the public, or is it better to keep those details confidential while they continue their work behind the scenes? It is not an easy decision. On one hand, investigators often withhold evidence because certain details are known only to the person responsible for the crime. Revealing too much too soon can make it harder to separate genuine suspects from people who simply repeat information they have seen in the news. Keeping key facts private also protects the integrity of future interviews and court proceedings if an arrest is eventually made. On the other hand, Fitzgerald believes there may come a point when releasing carefully selected information could generate new leads. Someone may recognize a unique phrase, a writing style, or another detail that investigators themselves have overlooked. He stressed that if authorities choose to release additional information, they should still hold back one or two pieces known only to investigators. That way, any future confession can still be tested against evidence that has never been made public. It is a measured approach, and one based on years of experience working complex investigations. For now, though, many of the biggest questions remain unanswered. Was the latest anonymous message simply another attempt to attract attention, or does it contain information investigators can verify? Does the alleged video even exist? Was the request for 1 Bitcoin nothing more than a scheme to make quick money from a family already enduring unimaginable pain? At this stage, there are no public answers. What is clear is that investigators cannot afford to ignore any credible lead, even when it appears unlikely. Every tip must be examined, every communication reviewed, and every possibility weighed against the evidence already collected. Most of those leads will ultimately lead nowhere, but history has shown that major cases are sometimes solved because someone took the time to investigate what first appeared to be an insignificant clue. For viewers following the Nancy Guthrie case, patience remains difficult. Each new report sparks hope that a breakthrough may finally be near, only for more questions to emerge. That emotional cycle has repeated itself many times over the past several months. Whether this latest message proves meaningful or joins the growing list of dead ends is something only investigators can determine. Until then, speculation will continue, but facts, not rumors, will ultimately decide where this investigation leads. We'll continue following every verified development in the Nancy Guthrie case as new information becomes available. In the meantime, what do you think? Does this latest note deserve serious attention, or do you agree with James Fitzgerald that it may simply be another attempt to exploit a high-profile investigation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoy thoughtful, evidence-based updates like this one, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future developments.